She sat alone in front of the mirror, hands pressed hard against her thighs, whispering the truth she had never dared say aloud. I didn't fall. I jumped. Her reflection stared back, merciless and unblinking, as the phone with his number burned on the nightstand. The room was arranged the way powerful rooms prefer to be, overlit, hushed, with every sound politely swallowed. Tiffany Ward sat at the head of a small round table, hands folded on the gloss, expression composed into the precise neutrality that once steadied markets. Around her, the hum of other conversations made a soft wall. She wore the kind of stillness that dared the world to blink first. Ms. Ward. The voice came from her left, careful and steady. She turned her head and found the janitor from the corridor, blue shirt, badge on a lanyard, the clean sheen of a freshly emptied trash cart behind him. He had the uncomplicated stance of a person who only speaks when he has something to say. She let her gaze travel over him once, cool and unhurried. You're interrupting. I know. He didn't flinch. I'll help you walk. Tiffany exhaled through her nose, amusement, irritation, something sharper beneath it that she suffocated on reflex. That's generous, she said, lifting one brow. Are you also available to fix interest rates and reverse time? Just your legs, he said. If you want. On another day, she might have dismissed him with a gesture. Today, curiosity rose like heat through a closed vent. What made a man who empties bins approach a woman who signs foundations into being? You don't know anything about me, she said. The sentence came out smooth, but a small part of her braced for the echo. He nodded, accepting that. I know what I saw. His eyes were not challenging, only observant, as if they'd been built for measuring small truths. Your left foot moved. Her mouth curved, practiced. Involuntary. They do that sometimes. Spasms mean nothing. Maybe, he said, except it moved when I said, stand. Not before. Not after. A thin line of heat pricked the nape of her neck. The chair beneath her felt suddenly too exact, the tabletop too reflective. This conversation is over. He didn't retreat. He let the words settle, like dust he chose not to stir. You're used to people either pitying you or pretending not to see you, he said softly. I'm not doing either. He glanced down, not rudely, not lingering, just long enough to place the weight of his attention where she avoided it. You can hate me for noticing. But I noticed. She watched him the way she watched unfavorable data, looking for a seam to pry open. Nothing gave. His hands were empty, his tone maddeningly even. A memory pressed at the edge of her ribs, a night balcony, a cold decision, a dawn of doctors saying words that meant no explanation at all. She pushed the picture down. What's your name? She asked, because control is sometimes a question. Caleb Miller. Mr. Miller, she said, tasting the syllables for sarcasm and finding none to savor. Do you often offer medical revelations between trash bins and mop buckets? Only when they're true. Confidence is cheap, she replied. Evidence is costly. He nodded again, as if she'd offered him a tool he knew how to use. Then try one thing, he said. When no one's watching, tell your foot to slide a towel across the floor. Half an inch. If nothing happens, I'll never bother you again. His voice didn't rise. It just arrived where it needed to be. But if it moves on purpose, even a little, that's not a spasm. That's you. The room narrowed to the circle of light on their table. Tiffany felt the familiar machinery of her defenses start up. Derision, dismissal, the practiced shrug that kept pity from sticking. I don't do parlor tricks. It isn't one, he said. It's a measurement. Silence pulled tight as thread. Somewhere behind her, cutlery chimed. She became acutely aware of the cool air against her wrists, the fixed weight of her lap blanket, the memory of ankles that once crossed without permission. You're finished, she said, and reached for the crispness of finality. Leave. Caleb's mouth softened, not a smile. Exactly. More like understanding choosing not to announce itself. He set a small card on the table, its corners squared with quiet precision. I'll be in the building all week. 10 minutes is all I'd ask. He tipped his head, neither deferent nor insolent, and moved his card away, wheels murmuring, steps steady. She didn't look at the card right away. She listened to his departure until the sound dissolved into the general hush. Then she let her gaze drop. A name. A number. Nothing dramatic. The faintest tremor touched her, not in her legs but somewhere in the structure that held them. and for a breath, she could feel the shape of the space where possibility might fit. Spasms mean nothing, she whispered to the glossy table, as if the surface could be convinced. Her reflection, composed, untouched, offered no argument. Still, the card stayed under her palm longer than it needed to. The penthouse was designed like armor, floor-to-ceiling glass, marble that refused to echo footsteps, and silence pressed so tightly against the walls it became part of the decor. Tiffany Ward wheeled herself into the bedroom without hurry, her reflection multiplying against the glass panes until she seemed an army of women frozen in time. She stopped in front of the mirror above her dresser and studied the posture she had perfected, shoulders steady, chin aligned, eyes that dared anyone to read beyond their surface. For a long moment, she just looked, waiting for some fracture in her own gaze. None appeared. She tilted slightly, checking angles. Her mouth was set in the line markets once trusted, partners once envied. But the glass had a memory longer than the body it contained, and the memory pressed forward, uninvited. The balcony, cold wind clawing her hair loose, a city glowing with its indifferent lights beneath her. She remembered Harrison's voice, every syllable ground down to contempt. You can't even keep a child alive, Tiffany. You're nothing without the show of control. The words had not been shouted. They had been worse, delivered in the tone of a man cataloging facts. She had stood at the railing, fingers clenched white, heartbeat too loud. His back had already turned. She had felt the weight of everything collapsing inward, and in the hollow space left behind, one thought formed. Don't feel. Don't need. Don't move. Then her grip released. Falling had been both terror and relief, as if she had chosen silence with her whole body. The doctors later had called it a miracle. No spinal cord damage, no shattered vertebrae, only bruises. She had heard them while staring at ceiling tiles, physically sound. She should walk. They did not understand. She hadn't fallen. She had jumped. And when she woke and found her legs unresponsive, a part of her almost smiled. It was protection. It was punishment. It was both. Now, years later, staring into her own eyes in the mirror, the admission finally escaped aloud, barely more than breath. I didn't fall. I jumped. The glass didn't flinch. It never did. She closed her eyes, pulse hammering, and pressed her palms against her thighs until her nails bit fabric. The silence of the room deepened. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to picture movement. Toes flexing, a towel sliding, the possibility Caleb had spoken into existence. The janitor with unshaken eyes. His words had burrowed into her defenses with the precision of truth. Her hand drifted across the dresser top until it found the card. Plain, white, unremarkable, yet somehow heavier than stock paper had any right to be. She traced the ink of his name, the blunt practicality of the number beneath it. Every instinct told her to tear it, burn it, scatter it into the city winds. But another voice, smaller, rawer, spoke under that command. Call. Try. Just once. She set the card on her lap, balanced it there like fragile glass, and wheeled herself to the window. Beyond the pane, the city sparkled without her, uncaring whether she rose or not. Her thumb brushed the edge of the card again. The movement was slight, but it was her choice. And choices, she realized, were heavier than paralysis. Her phone was on the nightstand. For several minutes, she simply stared at it, pulse rising with each second. Finally, she reached, pressed, and lifted it to her ear. The dial tone pulsed like a heartbeat through the room. When Caleb arrived, he didn't step in with the confidence of a savior or the hesitation of a trespasser. He carried only a gym bag, slung casual over one shoulder, and the air of someone who'd already decided the outcome belonged more to her than to him. Tiffany sat in the center of her living room, posture composed, blanket smoothed across her lap, eyes cool. She had prepared her face the way a soldier sharpens armor. "You've got 10 minutes," she said before he could even close the door. Her tone was a warning disguised as generosity. 10 minutes is enough," he replied, setting the bag on the floor. His movements were slow, deliberate, giving her the courtesy of letting silence arrange itself. He took out a rolled white towel, ordinary and unthreatening, and placed it neatly at her feet. She arched one eyebrow. "This is your miracle? Linen service?" He crouched so his eyes were level with hers. "Slide it. Just once. Doesn't have to be far." His voice was steady, almost casual, but the weight beneath it pressed her chest in ways she didn't want to admit. She let the smirk form, the one designed to kill hope before it could grow. You've wasted 3 of your minutes already. Then we'd better start. He leaned back on his heels, folded his hands loosely, and waited. No coaxing, no drama, just waiting, like an engineer letting a machine decide if it would start. Her gaze fell reluctantly to her foot, tucked motionless beneath the blanket's edge. For years she had lived in the safe certainty of stillness. Moving meant risk. Moving meant the possibility of failure sharp enough to cut her in half. Her stomach tightened. "I don't perform for audiences," she murmured. "Good," he said. "This isn't for me." The towel lay there, absurdly plain, and yet the room seemed to shrink around it. She drew a breath, pressed her palms flat against the chair's armrests, and whispered inside her skull, "Move." Nothing. The seconds ticked. Her throat went dry. She tried again, jaw clenched, the words louder this time. "Move, damn it." A flicker. Tiny, almost invisible, the faint scrape of cloth against wood. Tiffany's eyes shot to Caleb's face, half expecting smug triumph. But he only nodded once, eyes steady, as if acknowledging a data point. "That was you," he said. Her chest seized between a laugh and a sob. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "Spasms. That's all it's ever been." "Then make it spasm again," he said. His tone didn't shift, didn't rise. It simply invited. Sweat beaded at her temples. She fixed her gaze on the towel, imagined it as something to push away, an enemy, a memory, a weight she could no longer carry. Muscles trembled. And then, with a grinding slowness, the towel slid another inch across the floor. A strangled laugh broke out of her, surprising even herself. The sound was raw, jagged. Her hand flew to her mouth. "God," she whispered, eyes wide. It moved. Caleb didn't reach for her, didn't clap or cheer. He only leaned forward slightly, voice low. "That's not fraud. That's control." Her laughter twisted into a shuddering breath, moisture gathering at the corners of her eyes. For the first time in years, disbelief and hope collided inside her chest like twin storms. "I don't know if I can do it again," she said, voice shaking. "You don't have to," he replied. "Not tonight. But now you know you can." The towel lay crooked on the floor, silent proof of something she could no longer deny. Tiffany's palms pressed harder against the chair arms, grounding her against the trembling in her chest. She felt as if she had just stepped off the balcony again. But this time the air rushing past her carried the dangerous scent of possibility. Her 10 minutes were up. But time, she realized, had already shifted. The apartment was quiet after Caleb left, the kind of quiet that pressed against Tiffany's ears until she could hear her own heartbeat. She wheeled herself into the bedroom, half convinced that what had just happened had been some trick of perception, some hallucination conjured by desperation. The towel still lay on the floor in the living room, crooked, accusing. In the mirror, her reflection met her with its usual composure. The woman staring back wore the same immaculate silk blouse, the same steady jawline, the same cool detachment. Yet something beneath the surface had shifted, like a crack appearing under glass. Tiffany placed both hands on her thighs and pressed down, almost daring the muscles to respond. Nothing. The stillness was familiar, comforting even. But then her mind replayed it, the scrape, the undeniable movement, the sound that had pierced years of silence. Her breath caught. She leaned forward, eyes burning into her own reflection. "It happened. You did it." She whispered the words aloud, as if saying them might make them real. It moved. Her voice trembled with disbelief. A strange laugh rose in her throat and broke apart halfway out. She gripped the armrests, knuckles widening, trying to anchor herself. The mirror offered no reassurance, only the truth of her own face. Eyes wide, lips parted, fear and awe bleeding through the practiced mask. She had not expected laughter. She had not expected tears. And yet here they were, both threatening to spill at once. She pulled the blanket away from her legs, exposing pale skin that had not seen much sunlight in years. Her toes looked ordinary, almost fragile. Slowly, as if handling fragile glass, she willed them to respond. Nothing. She tried again, jaw clenched, heart pounding. A faint warmth stirred in the muscles, not enough to show, but enough for her to feel. Her hand flew to her mouth. That subtle thread of sensation was more dangerous than the absence had ever been. It carried with it not only possibility, but also the risk of collapse, of failing again, of proving herself wrong. She leaned back, trembling. "Don't hope," she muttered. It had been her creed for years, the way she'd kept herself safe. Hope was sharp. Hope was cruel. And yet, beneath the warning, something stubborn refused to be silenced. Caleb's voice replayed in her mind. That's not fraud. That's control. Control. She had built empires on that word. She had commanded men twice her size with it. Now, in this private room, it was the only word that made her hands stop shaking. She let her head rest against the chair, eyes closed, tears cooling on her cheeks. For the first time since the balcony, she felt a future pressing against her, insistent, frightening, impossible to ignore. The mirror, patient and merciless, held her image steady. And Tiffany, against every defense she had forged, allowed herself to look at that woman and imagine, just for a second, what it would mean if tomorrow the towel moved again. The next morning, Tiffany's apartment felt less like a sanctuary and more like a holding cell. The towel still lay on the hardwood where it had stopped the night before, mute evidence she could neither explain away nor fully accept. She avoided looking at it as she rolled past, clutching a coffee cup so tightly the porcelain almost cracked. Her phone buzzed against the counter. At first, she let it vibrate, assuming another foundation request, another board member seeking her approval. But the screen lit with a number she didn't recognize. One new message. She tapped it open. 5 words. "You're still a fraud." Her stomach clenched so hard the coffee sloshed. The words didn't come with a name, but she didn't need one. Harrison's voice echoed through them as surely as if he'd been standing in the room. The contempt, the dismissal, the quiet cruelty, it was his signature. Her hands shook. She closed the message, reopened it, closed it again. The towel in the corner of her eye suddenly looked absurd, pathetic. A scrap of fabric shifted by accident, not triumph. Spasms. That's all it ever was. She had almost believed otherwise. How stupid. She slammed the phone face down on the counter. The room thickened with silence. She wheeled herself back to the mirror, her armor already knitting itself around her. The faint warmth she had felt in her toes last night now seemed like mockery. She pressed her nails into her thighs until they left crescents. "Fraud," she whispered, echoing the text, testing how it tasted on her own tongue. Bitter. Familiar. Safe. The hours stretched. She ignored the phone when it buzzed again. Caleb, no doubt, waiting to schedule another session. She drew the curtains until the city vanished. Light narrowed into a dim haze. Days blurred, time lost its edges. The card he had given her still sat on the nightstand, but she stacked unread books on top of it until it disappeared. Meals came and went half-finished. Her reflection dulled into a figure she barely recognized. The tiny fracture that had opened after the towel slid was sealed now under layers of shame, cemented by one poisonous message. She told herself she was grateful. Better to be immovable stone than a fool reaching for what could never last. Her phone, dark and silent now, seemed heavier than lead. Somewhere beneath the surface, the memory of that towel scraping against wood still pulsed like an ember. But she smothered it. She told herself over and over, spasms mean nothing. And eventually, the words sounded almost true again. The storm broke at dusk. Rain streaked the glass walls of Tiffany's penthouse in silver rivulets, blurring the city into a watercolor smear. She sat in the darkened living room, curtains half drawn, a half-finished glass of wine balanced on the armrest. Her phone lay face down on the table, its silence heavier than any ring. When the knock came, sharp against the door, she stiffened. Nobody knocked. Visitors scheduled, assistants announced, deliveries buzzed. This sound was raw, insistent, human. It came again, louder. She wheeled herself closer, pulse quickening, and opened the door a fraction. Caleb stood there, soaked through, rain dripping from his hair onto his collar. His expression wasn't pleading, wasn't apologetic. It was steady, the same way it had been the first day he approached her table. "You didn't answer," he said. His voice was even, but the wetness running down his temple gave it weight. "I told you we were done," she replied, ice in her tone. She tried to close the door. His hand pressed flat against it, not forcing, but refusing release. "You think one message erases what you did?" His eyes searched hers, unflinching. "You moved that towel, Tiffany. You can't unlive that." The word, towel, felt obscene, too small to carry the enormity of her shame. She laughed once, brittle. It was a spasm. That's all. And if it wasn't, then it was pathetic. Inches don't matter. They matter to you, he said, or you wouldn't be hiding behind shadows. Her grip tightened on the doorframe. You don't know what it costs to hope. To believe, then fail. You walk out of here and go back to your little journal. I stay trapped in this body. He leaned forward, rain dripping from his sleeve onto the threshold. You're not trapped by your body. You're trapped by fear. You're not afraid of failing. You're afraid of matching again. The sentence landed like a strike. She swallowed hard, lips parting, but no words came. You've built a life on control, he continued, softer now. But control isn't the same as living. Right now you'd rather bury yourself than risk the smallest step. That's not safety. That's surrender. Her throat burned. She hated him for saying it, hated herself for knowing it was true. The silence between them filled with the patter of rain. Finally she whispered, "What if I can't do it again?" Caleb stepped across the threshold, lowering his voice as if speaking to a wound. "Then we try until you can. But don't tell me it never happened. I was there. I saw it. You felt it." Her hand fell from the doorframe. She closed her eyes, breath trembling. The fortress she had built around herself felt soaked through, its mortar dissolving under the downpour. Caleb didn't move closer. He just stood, steady and drenched, waiting, not demanding, not pleading, until the storm inside her chose its direction. The rain hammered the glass behind them, and in the quiet that followed, Tiffany realized he hadn't come to rescue her. He had come to refuse her surrender. The rain had slowed to a whisper by the time they moved inside. Tiffany sat in her chair, blanket crumpled at her lap, hair clinging damp against her temple from the mist that had blown in. Caleb set his soaked jacket across the arm of the sofa, water pooling beneath it, but he didn't seem to care. He reached into his bag and pulled out a worn notebook, edges curled, the kind of book carried daily, not for show but for survival. "This," he said, holding it up, "is my record. Every person I've worked with. Every small step that mattered." She watched him warily. A catalog of failures? He shook his head. A catalog of beginnings. He flipped the book open and traced a line with his finger. His voice softened as he read. June 12th. Right foot twitched twice. Patience said, "Maybe it was nothing." I wrote, "No, maybe is the start of yes." He turned the page. August 5th. Left knee lifted an inch. Took 11 tries. That inch was a mile. Tiffany closed her eyes, but the words painted themselves behind her lids. Twitches, inches, miles. Beginnings. Her throat constricted. Caleb went on, voice steady, unhurried. September 27th. A woman moved a towel half an inch. She cried, laughed, and told me it was fraud. I wrote, "Don't let her believe the lie." Her eyes snapped open. He was looking at her now, not at the page. The weight of being seen pressed so hard against her chest, she thought it might splinter. Her mouth opened, but only a whisper escaped. "Don't give up on me." It wasn't command, or sarcasm, or the steel she usually wielded. It was naked, stripped of armor, the sound of a voice she hadn't let out in years. Her reflection in the mirror across the room looked almost startled, as if she hadn't expected her own lips to form the plea. Caleb closed the notebook gently, set it on the table, and leaned forward just enough that his words reached her clearly. "I won't. Not until you stop giving up on yourself." The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes, as if she could dam them, but they slid down anyway. Her chest shook with the release, each sob dragging up pieces of grief buried under marble floors and boardroom masks. For the first time, she let herself cry for the child she'd lost, for the cruelty she'd endured, for the years stolen by silence. And when the flood slowed, she let herself breathe into the fragile, terrifying truth that she was not yet finished. The room was hushed again, but it no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a place where something broken had finally dared to speak. Tiffany lowered her hands, eyes red, and met Caleb's steady gaze. "Tomorrow," she said, voice ragged but firm. "We try again." Caleb nodded once, simple and sure. And for the first time since the balcony, Tiffany believed the word tomorrow might belong to her.